my, oh my, oh my. We are in a time. We are in a time. I'm not quite sure what to make of this, but I do know that we are in a time. Welcome back. You're listening to Lurie Daniel Favors on SiriusXM's Urban View. We're talking powers and becomes action. Hi, YouTube. Pleasure to see you all here. We here at Urban View just listened to two clips. The first was of Marvin Sapp. Uh, requiring, mandating, encouraging donations and encouraging giving to the tune of they needed to collect $40,000. $40,000. And I don't know if people knew that that's what was going to happen when they got the invitation to come to the church, to open up the doors of the church. But that is what happened. And he did indeed close the doors of the church and then lock the ushers. He had the ushers lock the door. We're going to talk about that. But we then just heard from another clip, YouTube, Pam Bondi, the quote unquote attorney general, who is technically the lawyer for the country, but definitely seems to be the lawyer for MAGA. She's definitely the MAGA Trump lawyer. But we heard her talking about the fact that there was probably not going to be an investigation. Yeah, no, not going to be an investigation into Signalgate, which tells all of us that in America, freedom of speech means that if you are a student writing an op-ed or advocating for the liberation of some people that the country you are a student in is assisting in the bombing and destruction thereof, you can be snatched up off the street. You can be abducted and secreted away as if we were in, I don't know, Iran, which technically we might be going to war with in a minute, but that can happen. But if you are a top level military personnel member of the apparatus of the military, and you engage in the distribution of state secrets, secrets, American secrets, intelligence secrets, classified secrets, and y'all having a whole ass group chat about it on an app that you can get from the Apple Store or whatever the Google version of the Apple Store is. I think it's the Google Play Store. I can't remember. But there ain't nothing gonna happen to you. You're gonna be just fine. And then we had Marvin Sapp demanded $40,000 before they could leave the church. Now, I have thoughts on all of this, but I was thinking about dear brother Marvin Sapp. I love Marvin Sapp's music. And from what I've seen, he is a pastor who has inspired a lot of people. But when I saw the video clip, we're going to deal with these things a little bit separately. When I saw the video clip of him demanding the money, to the $40,000, and then telling the ushers to shut the door, close the door. And then obviously the ushers was like, what's he talking about? He talking to you, he talking to me, because he had to say it several more times, a few more times. All I could think of was his song, Never Would Have Made It. And I was like, never would have paid it. I was like, never would have paid it. No, not me. Why did you lock the door? Feels like the church is stealing from the Black community. I'm just personally, I never would have paid it. And that's just me, because I know that the Lord knows my heart. I never would have paid it. I think we got to do things a little differently in the church. And it just reminded me that one of the last church services that I sat in before I left the church, it was a very similar moment. It was a revival. And you know, revivals can get very financially related. And keep in mind, I'm a Kojic girl. Okay. I came up in Kojic. We had to do some holiness, some assemblies of God, because my parents are military. So I went everywhere from Kojic to like non-denominational white assemblies of God churches. So I have seen the call for money done in a variety of ways, in a variety of accents, and in a variety of voices, and in a variety of calling on the name of the Lord. Hi. I mean, I've seen it all. Like, it's great and it's fine. It always makes me uncomfortable. Always makes me uncomfortable. That may just be me. Marvin Sapp did issue a statement, however, and because apparently a lot of us were singing, never would have paid it. A lot of us were singing that, but he put out a statement, to be fair, because I did criticize him about this yesterday as well. So it's only fair that I read his statement before we get to the political nonsense of the day. It's Friday. We're trying to ease up a bit. I ain't got no Fragile Whites story for y'all this week, so we're going to ease into Friday a little bit. But he wrote in his response, he said, let's add context to the clip on social media. He recognizes and acknowledges that this clip did go viral. This is actually a clip of an event, an international gathering held last year. And he talks about the fact that he challenged the people to come up with the money. And he says, some have taken issue with a particular moment where I instructed the ushers rather firmly, yes, it was rather firm, Brother Martin, to close the doors during the offering. To those unfamiliar with the church context or who may not regularly attend worship gatherings, this has been misinterpreted as holding people hostage as well as offensive. That was never my intent. That may be true. And as someone who is familiar with these gatherings, I can just tell you that it always makes me uncomfortable when it feels like we have shifted from praise and worship into an auction. It has always made me uncomfortable. And my daddy was a preacher. My mama was a missionary. I get it. I understand it. I know that the church ain't going to pay for itself, which is weird because that is technically whatever. That's a story for another day. He acknowledges this. And I just want to say that if you are a pastor, if you are in leadership, if you are in the church community and your call for giving shifts from praise and worship and recognizing that there is an element of worship when it comes to giving and the spiritual power of giving. And it shifts to, who can I get $1, $2, who got $2, $3, oh, I got a $4. I need a prayer for the Holy Spirit. Who wants an extra dose of the ghost for the Holy Spirit? Can I get a 5? Can I get a 5? Can I get 10? Or if you're like a Paula White, and Paula White, who is now the religious leader for Donald Trump in the White House. And when Paula White, what's the Paula Dean? One of the Paula, she's a white woman pastor. And when she gets up there talking about money, she talks a little bit slower, but she's still an auctioneer. And she says for $125, you can get a holy prayer. And maybe for $250, she might speak in a good tongue. He tie my bow tie, my Robin in a Hyundai. She might do that for you. And for the $1,000, she will assign an angel to you. Literally. Like just for $1,000. So how much deliverance do you need? How much spirituality do you need in your life? You let her know and you send a check or a PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, or electronic other form of transfer. You let her know, and then she will assign the appropriate measure of spiritual healing based on your monetary situation. Christianity in America has always been a credit card for salvation. Ever since the church conditioned or condoned and participated in the slave trade and the annihilation of the indigenous so they could steal their land and further engage in the slave trade. So forgive me if I have a real difficulty dealing with pastors who make it feel like if you don't have enough, who make it feel like you ain't nobody leaving till we get this money, particularly when I have yet to hear any pastor. Well, I shouldn't say that. Freddie Gaines, I think, has done a little bit of this. No, Freddie Gaines has definitely done this. Reverend Otis Moss Jr. has done this. There are others. Their names escape me at the moment because, frankly, I have like an emotional barrier around myself, between myself and the church, because of, I'm still healing from church hurt. But if you got all the spiritual smoke for your parishioners to bring money to the altar, but you ain't once raised up casting out the demons of white supremacy in this nation, I got issue with that. Because I got issue with that. And this is one of the things that on Monday, today's my podcast episode, we're next week going to be getting into religion, white Christian nationalism and religion. And so you're going to hear some more conversation about white Christian nationalism and religion. Today, the podcast episode that releases a continuation of my conversation with Dante King and his book, The 400-Year Holocaust. This book here, The 400-Year Holocaust, White America's Legal, Psychopathic, and Sociopathic Black Genocide. We continue that conversation today. He and I are slow walking through that book. But next week, we're going to kick off a few segments on white Christian nationalism, race, and the impact on Black political engagement. So this is sort of a precursor to that. That'll drop on Monday. Thank you to those of you who download the podcast. Lurie breaks it down. But white supremacy is a whole ass demon. I guess it's a spirit from the abyss. It is a demonic spirit that manifests in whiteness ways in culture that we see here. So if your church got all the smoke for people who can't give, or your church has all the intensity and the capacity to pray and call on the Spirit of the Lord and have the flames of the Holy Ghost descend upon the people, and you can be slain in the spirit for everything, to get a job, to get a husband, to get your child out of whatever situation they're in, to get some money in your life, and never once are you using your spiritual power to bind up and banish the demons of white supremacy that are the principalities and high places that we're dealing with right now. What the fuck are you doing, sir? In the name of Jesus. Marvin Sapp's message went on to acknowledge the discomfort that this all caused for people. And he also says, we're in a social media age, so snippets can make something seem like something it's not. I appreciate that. It is true. And then he references 1 Chronicles 29, not 1 Chronicles, Donald Trump, 1 Chronicles 29. And he talks about this moment where David in the Bible is preparing for the temple and giving and encouraging the people to give. And he talks about the methodology that they use for giving, all of which makes perfect sense, beautiful sense. And he talks about how giving is good. And the Bible provides a formula for how you're supposed to do it. And that's beautiful. But David and the people of Israel was vanquishing demons. David and the children of Israel were vanquishing enemies. Now, we're going to leave aside for a moment the fact that the enemies they were vanquishing, this is really a story about colonization and conquest. Like when the children of Israel go into the promised land and they take it because it's full of land and milk and honey, it was somebody else's land. And so we're not going to talk about the fact that it's all about colonization and conquering in the Bible. We're going to leave that to the side for now in the name of Jesus. I'm just saying, one of the reasons I think David might have been able to do that is because David and his folks had just come out of war. right? They were preparing to go into war. They were preparing to build in community. And unfortunately, the Black church, the white church, the Christian church has done a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of yammering for personal salvation, raising money. But you could be an atheist and raise money. I done been in nonprofit fundraisers with people drinking and engaging in all sorts of profane acts that I don't think the good Lord Jesus will be comfortable around. They can raise six figures in a minute because they got money. They don't need Jesus for that. And I just wonder why it is that in our churches and in our spiritual spaces, the most powerful example of spiritual power that we've got has to do with money. That's just me. So I never would have paid it. Not me, no. I never would have paid it. No, not me. Sorry, because I'm just saying. But I did want to acknowledge he did put out this statement. You all should read it. Jonah, I'm going to put it in the Zoom chat so you could tweet it out. People can take a look at it. If I'm going to criticize you and you put out a statement, he didn't direct it at me. He don't know me from a can of paint. I don't even know that he knew what I said because I don't even know that he knows that I'm alive. But I did, because in fairness and transparency, I did want to share all of that with you. Because again, we're in a moment right now where we're going to need people who have spiritual power. We're going to need spiritual warriors. We need that right now. But if the best your spirituality can do is get you a paycheck, son, I don't need that. Like, that's not doing nothing for the spirits of white Christian nationalism and the demons of white supremacy that are destroying this planet right now. So I'm going to need us to think bigger, pray harder, build better. Anyway, let's get into some actual news today. Hi, YouTube. I don't know if I said that earlier already this morning. Hi, YouTube. I hope everybody's doing all right. We got some stuff to get into. But before I do, I need to address something that I have seen as sort of a continuing thread of commentary whenever I have a conversation on live or whenever I have a conversation on air about what our current political reality is. And the reason this is important is because I really want us to have a sense of political maturity that, through no fault of our own, mostly no fault of our own, we don't have a whole lot of in this society. We don't have a whole lot of civic maturity. And I think it's important that we do so, because we need to, if we understand how politics works and what politics is supposed to do, we need to have a greater level of maturity and elevate our understanding when it comes to politics. Sometimes during a conversation or commentary, I will say something along the lines of, y'all didn't want to vote for that lady, or that lady wasn't Black enough for y'all. And as a way of saying, but you either stayed home and didn't want to come vote. And I always acknowledge that there was, yes, voter suppression. Yes, people had their votes challenged. Yes, there were bomb threats, all of that being baked into the math. Not enough people came out and voted. A whole lot of people voted down ballot, didn't want to vote for the president. And I will say something like, but y'all didn't want to vote for that lady because she wasn't Black enough. And then inevitably, especially as we get more members of our YouTube community and of our Urban View community, I will hear something along the lines of, why are you bashing the voters who didn't want to vote for Kamala? I want to be really clear. This is not about bashing any voters. You have the right to vote for whoever you want to vote for. And you have the right to not vote at all. And as a voting rights attorney, I run a whole ass law center that helps people understand how to engage in the ballot and how to meaningfully use the civic systems that we have and that we live in to determine how our lives should look. And so this is not about bashing voters, but I really want us to understand this point so that we can mature a little bit, because as these people continue to break the systems that we're in, whatever system we rebuild or build from scratch on the other side of this very awful moment that we find ourselves in, it has to be infused with a greater understanding of how we got to this space. And it has to be infused with an understanding as to how we do better when it comes to political systems going forward. So with that, I just want to say a couple of things, and then we'll, depending on the time, we'll continue this conversation either on YouTube or Urban View. You already know what's going to happen at the 11 o'clock hour. So beyond the, beloved internet strangers, and those of you who I do not know in Urban View who feel this way, I'm going to look you in the eyes and hold your hands gently in between two napkins as I say the following thing, and just know that it is being said with love. When we are evaluating candidates for an election, in any election, we have to deal with America as it is, not America as we wish it to be. We have to deal with the candidates as they are, and not with the candidates as we wish them to be. And when it comes to evaluating candidates, when it comes to picking who you're going to vote for, you have to ask yourself two basic questions. And those questions are, number one, which of these candidates will help my community the most? And number two, which of these candidates will hurt my community the least? These are the questions that sort of take the noise of, well, I don't really like her and I don't really like him. That is sort of, that's just noise. That's just noise. And it allows you to filter out the noise and get down to what really matters. You have a set of candidates in front of you. Now, it might be that you wish there were other candidates in front of you. I'm not going to begrudge you that. That is your business. I have felt that many, many times. There are many times I get into the voting booth, particularly at a general election, because I root for like the candidate that I think is going to be the most progressive in the primary. And often my candidate of choice does not win because I'm a very progressive minded person. My values are very progressive. And I'm not always in sync with the rest of my neighbors who want something perhaps a little bit more middle of the road. And so I vote for my most exciting candidate, the candidate who's either going to help my community the most or hurt my community the least in the primary. And often by the time I get to the general, which is the next round of the election, if you think about elections like as tournaments, your primary election is like round one of the tournament. Whoever makes it out of the tournament, round one, then goes to the next level, the final level, which is the general election. By the time I get to the general election, I'm usually picking between people I really am not a fan of at all. And so I have to ask myself those two questions. Which of these people on this paper, not the people who ain't on the paper, because if you ain't on the paper, you ain't gonna win this thing. And we're going to talk about why that matters in just a moment. So which of the candidates that I see on the ballot are going to help my community the most or hurt my community the least? And those two questions are important because I want us to have a conversation about the game of politics. Okay. Politics is not a game where it's just about points on a scoreboard. Politics is a game where the goal is to decide who gets what resources. Okay, so this is the game of politics. What are the resources? Well, let's look at some of the resources that are currently being taken away by the Doja boys, elongated muskrat, and the big ball or tiny grape nuts, whatever you want to call these 19-year-old kids who are destroying the American government from the inside out because they're hackers. Some of the resources that they're starting to take away include education. Right, destroying the Department of Education, school funding, funding for students with IEPs and learning disabilities or physical disabilities, daycare programs. I just saw a report that tens of thousands of children in New York City are going to lose access to daycare because of the federal funding programs that are being cut. After school programs for our kids, summer youth employment programs that keep our kids off the streets, community centers, grocery stores. These are the resources. Libraries, electricity to power our homes, heat to warm our homes, clean water to drink, paved roads, a mail delivery system, a sanitation system to take away the trash, and an internet service, a sewer system to take the poop and the pee out when we use the bathroom. These are all resources that get distributed in the game of politics. Now, back in the day, like long time ago, when we were small, ancient people and living in not small ancient people, when we were small communities of ancient people living in small communities. I didn't mean we were like literally small. I said that and I instantly started thinking of Bushmen or there's another name for them that is less pejorative, but people who are very physically small in stature. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about at a time before we had cities, major cities, when we were small hunting gathering groups, right? Not a whole lot of people on the planet. During that time, these decisions about who was going to get school and all these decisions could be made very easily collectively. Like we had small groups of people to work with. The bigger your community got, the more you needed a system to distribute these resources. Now, think about politics as a game, right? And video games have multiple different levels. When I was younger as a kid, I love me some Sega Genesis, especially once we got that game code cartridge and you could cheat. Ooh, child, I love me some Sega Genesis. Early some Nintendo, Game Boy, like that's my era. This new stuff that y'all got right now is cool, that's good. But I'm an old school kind of person. And sometimes the graphics of new games make me a little dizzy. Sorry, that's just me. I'm getting old. But think about politics as a video game. And when you think about politics as a video game, on the first level of the politics, because the purpose of this game is to distribute those resources, when you think about the first level of the game, that's the easiest level. First level is always the easiest level. And let's say that the first level is the game for the dictators, right? Dictators or kings, whatever the king or the dictator say, that's what you're going to get about those resources. So let's say in level one, we have some questions we have to ask. Who's going to get the good hospitals? Well, level one is the dictator or the king level. So what the king say? What the dictator say? Who's going to get the bad hospital? Well, what the king say? What the dictator say? That's the answer to that question. Who's going to get the good grocery store and the bad grocery store? Well, you got to ask the king. The dictators and the kings, that's their decision. They get to decide who's going to get the good grocery store, who's going to get the bad grocery store, who's going to get the good or the bad schools. Well, we on level one. So what the king say? What the dictator say? Because that's how we going to determine who's going to get them resources, the good schools or the bad schools. You see how easy that is? When you are in a dictatorship, Or if you're in a monarchy where you have a king or a queen, the answer to every question about who's going to get these resources is, what did the king say? What did the dictator say? That is the answer to the question, because what they say goes. This is level one. This is easy. There's no quit thinking. You don't have to have a committee meeting. There doesn't have to be a lot of discussion. There doesn't have to be a lot of campaigning. The answer to the question of who's going to get what resource is, what did the king say? What did the dictator say? Boom, easy level. Easy level. The next level is the democracy level. Once you pass level one, answer all the questions, you will go to level two. You got to fight the next level boss. Level two is the democracy level. Level two is way more complicated, way more complicated. Let's run through those same sorts of questions at the democracy level. Who gets the good hospital? Well, what did the people decide? Who's going to get the good school and the bad school? What did you ask the people? What did the people decide? Who's going to get the library? Well, you got to ask the people. Who's going to get the grocery store and where the grocery store going to go? You got to ask the people. What did the people say? That's how level two in democracy works. And how do you know what the people say? Well, the people tell their representatives, who are the elected officials. Just a note here, your elected official is not a leader just because they're an elected official. There are some elected officials who are also leaders. There are some leaders who are elected officials. But just because you are an elected official does not mean you're a leader. As the elected official, you are the game piece on the board that the people use to determine, to voice what it is that they want. So you know what the people say because the people tell their representatives what they want. They go to this town square. They go to the city council meetings. They meet with the elected officials. This is how the game is played. And when enough people from the community get the representative to understand what it is that they want, the representative goes to the voting location and votes for the school to go here, the grocery store to go there, the hospital to go there, because they're listening to the voice of the people. Now, in level one, in the dictator level, if it's a good decision that's made, the king and the dictator, they get all the glory because it was a good decision. And they're the only ones that got to decide. If it was a bad decision on level one, the king and the dictator, they get all the blame because it was a bad decision. And they were the ones that got to decide. Y'all, this is the part where I'm going to speak very gently and lovingly again, because this is a part where we have a little bit more maturity when it comes to how we engage civically. In the democracy level of the game, the people are the ones who are deciding. So if there's a good decision, the people get the glory for that good decision. When Black people determined that we needed public schools after enslavement ended, and they forced the creation of the first Department of Education, the first school system in the 1800s and late 1800s, that was a good decision. They get all the glory. When the people decided that they were going to, fight for the Civil Rights Act, fight for the Voting Rights Act, fight for the Fair Housing Act, fight for pay equity, so that women and people with a uterus and a set of breasts weren't going to be discriminated against financially in the workplace. Those were good decisions. The people made those decisions, and the representative listened. They win, and they get the glory for that. But when the people decide not to vote or tell the representatives what they want, when the people decide to stay home, when the people decide to not participate because they have so many other things happening, because see, level one dictatorship, you ain't got to do nothing but listen. You could be a slave in dictator level. Slaves don't think, they just do. Right? Level two if you made it to level two, democracy level, you are obligated. If you're going to win the game, you got to elevate your engagement the same way you do in a video game. And so when you make a bad decision, then in much the same way that when you make a good decision, the people get the praise. When you make a bad decision, the people also get the blame. That's how the democracy level of the game of politics actually works. And so when we're talking about the fact that people didn't like Kamala Harris, that is your right. That's your right. I'm not here to tell you that you don't have the right. I don't think you got to like her. A lot of people are like, well, I don't really do care about the fact that she wasn't Black. That's your business. If you cared a lot about as much of you, if her racial background mattered that much to you, and that was a determining factor for how you voted, that good for you. That I'm glad you were able to actualize that and were able to either not vote for her or to vote for someone else or not vote at all, because that is your right to do. And as a voting rights attorney, I am going to fight for you to have the right to do that. But that does mean that since your decision won, that you also bear part of the responsibility for how the democracy game is now distributing the resources, because that's what it is at democracy level. Now at king level, dictator level, you can say, doesn't matter what I said, doesn't matter how I felt, didn't matter that I told everybody not to vote for that lady because I didn't like her because I didn't think she was Black enough, didn't matter that I listened to a 3 second clip out of a 2 hour interview and decided that when I heard her, Yeah, decided when I heard her say, I'm not going to do anything for Black people, even though the fuller context of that said that if we do something just for Black people, the courts will strike it down. But because Black people are at the bottom, if we do something that help people who are at the bottom, which will directly help Black people, it's going to help everybody else. And if you willfully close your mind off of that and you help spread misinformation, and then you also are partially responsible for what we are experiencing now. If you stayed home and couldn't make it to the voting booth, that is fine. If you chose not to vote because you think all parties are the same, that is fine. But that does mean that you also, because we're at democracy level, we're not at dictator level, it means that you also bear some of the responsibility for where we're at. It just does. Not to blame you, but this is what we're in a video game. It's just a game. It's not personal. It's just a game. And it's important to know what you gave up by making that decision. So I'm going to repeat this list that Patrick Tomlinson and others have shared before. Had you chosen differently, had we in the democracy, I guess it's a we because we all voted and enough of us who wanted what we say we wanted, not enough of us came out. So what we could have had on this democracy level with the resource distribution, had other people voted differently, without blame, this is just the reality of this. Elections have consequences. And here are the consequences. We could have right now, and as we enter the month of April, or prepare to enter the month of April, been seeing people get their first $25,000 to buy their first home. We could have been seeing people get the $50,000 deduction to start their businesses. We could have seen people who are having new babies get that $6,000 for the first year of the baby's life. We could have seen 401ks that were growing and exploding as opposed to shrinking and contrasting with the markets. Inflation would be shrinking and not growing. Interest rates would be falling. Veterans would still have their jobs. About 80,000 of them about to lose their jobs. They're about to lose their benefits plans. Gaza would still be a fuckery, but they would not be building the Riviera on Gaza. And that's a big issue. But again, help the community the most, hurt the community the least. It's not going to be 100% on any of these. These are the considerations that we have to take into account. Allies wouldn't be canceling arms deals. Trump would be in prison. Elongated Muskrat would still be under multiple criminal investigations, probably heading to jail. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid would be protected as opposed to being under threat. The Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, the NOAA agency, which is our weather agency, NASA wouldn't all be under attack. The FBI wouldn't be led by a madman. The Department of Justice wouldn't be led by a mad woman. We wouldn't have a Kristi Noem cosplaying in front of a green screen and standing in front of prisoners, which is actually a violation of international law to pose and to cosplay like she's an actual warrior. We wouldn't be drawing up plans to invade Panama, Mexico, Greenland, or Canada. We would not be experiencing tariffs on lumber and the deportation of students who are here to learn. We would never have heard of things like Gulf of America. There wouldn't be a vaccine denier managing our vaccines who just hired a vaccine denier to determine whether or not vaccines are safe. We would not have planes crashing in midair, catching fire and falling out the sky. The trans troops would still be able to serve, and we would have confidence that our young men and women who are in uniform are not going to be led into meaningless wars that are decided on signal apps that everybody in the goddamn world who knows how to hack, including the big balls of the Doji conspiracy, we wouldn't be having those things. Our Ukraine would have arms. Russia would be in retreat. This is not about blaming people who did not want to vote for that lady. It's about having a more mature conversation about the consequences of how we show up in the game of politics. And if the game of politics is really just the science of distributing resources, you don't have to like the scientist. You don't have, notice how like who's going to help me the most or hurt me the least. Notice how none of the questions you have to ask when you get in the voting booth include anything like, do I like her? Do I like him? Those aren't the questions. It's not about blaming the voters, but it is about recognizing that when you vote in a particular way, or when you choose not to vote, we're at democracy level. Now we're about to get kicked back into dictatorship level because not enough people voted to preserve democracy. So now it's going to be a whole big fight to try to preserve democracy. And this is one of the reasons why Malcolm X said ballot or the bullet. And one of the things implied in that speech was it's a whole lot easier with the ballot than it is the bullet, because most of y'all ain't ready for that bullet type smoke, including yours truly. So this is never about blaming voters, especially considering the voter suppression that we experience, but it is about having a clear-eyed understanding as to what time it is and how our votes or our non-votes and how what we fixate on, which ain't got nothing to do with hospitals, schools, roads, libraries, or any of that stuff, how it matters. It really matters. We got to go to commercial break. On the other side of it, we're completely switching gears. Keyshawn Lane will be joining us, and then we'll pick this back up again after that. Much more to come. We'll be right back after this. Bye, YouTube.